A tired truck driver pulls into a diner parking lot near Amarillo. His hands shake as he pours sugar into his coffee. The waitress sees his pale face and asks if he's okay. He looks up with empty eyes. He tells her about the girl he just dropped off down the road, the young woman who said thank you for the ride. She stepped out into the desert night. Now he's staring at her death notice on his phone. It's dated 3 years ago. This scene has happened many times along America's most famous road. Route 66 runs over 2,400 miles from Chicago to Los Angeles. It cuts through the heart of the nation. But somewhere along this strip of road lies a mystery. It has haunted drivers for decades, a ghost that shows up when you least expect it, then it vanishes without any reason. The Mother Road is what Route 66 came to be called. It was built in 1926. It linked small towns and big cities like no road before it. During the Great Depression, it carried families west. They were looking for work and hope. World War II brought army trucks and workers racing along its path. In the 1950s, it became the sign of American freedom and fun. But with all that history came stories. Strange stories about weird meetings in the long spaces between towns. Reports of people who showed up and disappeared along the roadside. And most common of all, tales of ghost hitchhikers. They seemed to live between worlds. The mystery began showing up in written form during the early 1940s. Gas station workers and diner staff started hearing the same stories from scared drivers. A young woman in a white dress, always nice, always thankful for the ride, and always gone by morning. She left behind only questions and a cold feeling. Local newspapers first said these reports were just war worry or travel tiredness, but as more accounts came in, a pattern showed up. The sightings happened around certain places. Empty stretches where the road cut through endless grass or desert, places where the next town might be 50 miles away. The most recorded meetings happened near Tucumcari, New Mexico. This small town sits about halfway along Route 66's path through the state. In 1943, it had just over 5,000 people. Most travelers saw it as a quick stop for gas and food. Then they kept going on their trip. But Tucumcari began getting attention for different reasons. Drivers said they picked up a hitchhiker just east of town, near the old train crossing. The same story kept happening with scary sameness. A young woman, usually said to be in her early 20s, would show up by the road. She wore a simple white dress and had no bags. When drivers stopped, she would ask for a ride to places further down the road. The talks during these rides followed the same pattern. The woman spoke softly and seemed sad. She talked about being far from home. She needed to reach family. Some drivers remembered her asking about the date. She would say how much the land had changed. As they got close to where she wanted to go, she would get quiet. Many drivers looked in their back mirror. The back seat was empty. One of the first written accounts came from Harold Peterson. He was a traveling salesman from Kansas City. In September 1943, Peterson was driving west near Tucumcari. He saw a person by the road. The sun had set an hour before. His headlights lit up a young woman in white. She stood perfectly still beside the road. Peterson later told police that something about how she stood struck him as odd. She wasn't waving or trying to ask for help. She just stood there like she was waiting. Against his better sense, he pulled over. The woman came to the passenger side. She asked if he was going towards Santa Rosa. Peterson said yes and asked her to get in. During the 30-mile drive, Peterson tried to make talk. The woman said her name was Mary. She didn't say much else. She seemed far away. She spoke in a voice he said was barely louder than a whisper. When they reached the edge of Santa Rosa, she asked him to stop at a certain corner. Peterson pulled over. He turned to ask if she needed help finding where she was going. The passenger seat was empty. Peterson looked around the area. He found no sign of the woman, no footprints in the sandy dirt beside the road, no sign that anyone had been in his car at all. Confused and upset, he drove to the nearest police station. He wanted to report what happened. The desk officer listened nicely but didn't seem surprised by the story. He told Peterson that similar reports had been filed often over the past several months. What made Peterson's meeting special was how much detail he remembered. As a salesman, he was trained to watch and remember. He gave police a clear description of what the woman looked like. He told them exactly where she disappeared. This information would prove helpful as more reports came in. The mystery wasn't just nighttime meetings. In bright daylight during the summer of 1944, truck driver James Morrison saw a hitchhiker. It was near the same place where Peterson had stopped. Morrison was hauling food from California to Chicago. He had made this run dozens of times. He knew every mile marker and landmark along the route. The woman flagged him down around noon on a Tuesday. Morrison pulled his big truck to the side. He waited as she climbed into the cab. She wore the same white dress other drivers had talked about. She said her name was Mary. Morrison gave her water from his bottle. He asked where she was going. Mary wanted a ride to Albuquerque. That was still hours away. Morrison agreed and they began the trip. Unlike other stories, this meeting lasted several hours. Morrison later remembered their talk in detail. Mary seemed to know the area well, but she spoke about places and people like she was remembering things from long ago. She talked about landmarks that Morrison knew had been torn down or moved years before. As they got close to Albuquerque, Mary got more and more quiet. She asked Morrison to stop at a cemetery on the east edge of town. Morrison found the place and pulled over. Mary thanked him for the ride. She stepped down from the cab. Morrison watched her walk through the cemetery gates. He lost sight of her among the gravestones. Later that evening, Morrison stopped at a truck stop near Albuquerque. He told other drivers about the meeting. He described the woman and the cemetery where he'd dropped her off. An older driver named Bill Walsh listened to the story with growing interest. Walsh had been running routes through New Mexico for over 20 years. He knew the local history well. Walsh told Morrison that the cemetery he described was called Fairview. It had been started in the 1882nd. It held the graves of many early settlers. Walsh also said something that made Morrison's blood run cold. A young woman named Mary Henderson had been buried there in 1918. She had died in a car crash while traveling Route 66's earlier version, the Ozark Trail. Morrison's meeting was a turning point in how these events were seen. The link to local history suggested the ghost hitchhiker might be more than just seeing things or wrong identity. People began looking at cemetery records and history books. They were looking for patterns that might explain the sightings. The research showed several interesting facts. Mary Henderson had really died in a car crash in 1918. It happened near the place where most hitchhiker sightings occurred. She had been 22 years old. She was traveling alone when her car flipped over during a storm. Her body had been found 3 days later. She was buried in Fairview Cemetery. Local people confirmed that Mary had been known for her kindness to strangers. She often helped travelers who passed through the area. She gave directions or supplies. Some remembered that she had wanted to see more of the country beyond New Mexico's borders. As word of the Mary Henderson link spread, more witnesses came forward. Their stories shared amazing similarities. The ghost hitchhiker always showed up as a young woman in a white dress. She always used versions of the name Mary. Her wanted destinations usually lay along Route 66's westward path, and she always disappeared before reaching her stated goal. The most chilling meeting happened in late 1945. World War II was just ending. Corporal Robert Sullivan was driving home to Los Angeles after leaving the Army. He had served in the Pacific and was eager to see his family again. The long drive from his base in Texas gave him time to think about his experiences. He could plan for life after the war. Sullivan was traveling through New Mexico when he met the hitchhiker. It was just before midnight. He was pushing hard to reach Albuquerque before stopping for the night. His headlights caught a person standing beside the road. It was near the familiar place east of Tucumcari. Sullivan had heard stories about ghost hitchhikers from other soldiers, but he'd thought they were just war stories. The woman looked exactly as other witnesses had described, young, dressed in white, and standing still by the roadside. Sullivan's military training made him careful, but he was tired and wanted to get home. He decided to stop. The woman came to his car. She asked for a ride to Los Angeles. Sullivan was surprised by her destination. Los Angeles was over 800 miles away. It would take at least 2 days of driving. When he mentioned this, the woman simply said she had family there. She needed to reach them. Something in her voice touched Sullivan's heart. He thought of his own family waiting for his return. He agreed to take her as far as he was going. The woman got into the passenger seat and thanked him quietly. Sullivan started driving again. He looked at his passenger from time to time. She seemed to fade in and out of focus when he wasn't looking directly at her, but when he looked straight at her, she appeared solid and real. They drove mostly in silence through the night. As dawn came, Sullivan stopped at a diner outside Flagstaff, Arizona. He was exhausted and needed coffee before going on. He asked his passenger to join him for breakfast. She said no. She would wait in the car. Sullivan went inside and ordered coffee and eggs. The meal made him feel better. He was eager to finish the final part of his trip home. When Sullivan came back to his car, the passenger seat was empty. He looked around the area. He found no sign of the woman. Other customers in the diner said they had seen him arrive alone. The diner's owner mentioned that similar things had happened often over the past few years. Travelers would stop and talk about passengers who weren't there. Sullivan finished his drive to Los Angeles, but couldn't forget his meeting. He contacted local newspapers and police departments. He hoped to find an answer. His military background made his account believable. Police took his report seriously. They confirmed that his description matched those given by dozens of other witnesses. The mystery continued through the 1950s as Route 66 reached its peak popularity. The rise of car culture brought millions of travelers onto the highway. With them came new reports of ghost hitchhiker meetings. The stories spread beyond New Mexico to other parts of the Mother Road. Arizona began reporting similar sightings, especially near Winona and Flagstaff. California drivers described meetings near Barstow and along the Mojave Desert sections. Even stretches through Oklahoma and Texas produced ghost hitchhiker reports. The mystery seemed to follow Route 66's path from end to end. But the New Mexico sightings stayed the most regular and well-recorded. The area around Tucumcari became known among truckers and regular travelers as a hotspot for strange meetings. Some drivers began avoiding the area completely. They took other routes to bypass the ghost zone. Others actively looked for the experience. They hoped to meet the mysterious hitchhiker themselves. These planned attempts rarely worked. The ghost seemed to show up only when least expected. She appeared to travelers who were really focused on reaching their destinations, not to people who were ghost hunting. In 1957, a team of researchers from the University of New Mexico decided to study the mystery in an organized way. Psychology professor Dr. Eleanor Martinez led the team. They set up watching equipment along the highway near Tucumcari. They talked to witnesses. They looked at historical records. They tried to document any unusual activity. Dr. Martinez came to the study with healthy doubt. She thought the ghost hitchhiker reports came from a mix of factors. These included tiredness, suggestion, and the mental effects of long-distance driving. Her goal was to disprove the mystery through careful scientific study. The research team spent 6 months watching the area. They used cameras and audio recording equipment. They used devices that measured electromagnetic fields. They talked to hundreds of travelers. They wrote down every reported sighting. The results surprised even Dr. Martinez's doubting expectations. While the team never captured clear proof of ghostly activity, they recorded patterns that couldn't be easily explained. Temperature drops happened at specific places along the highway. There was no clear weather reason for these drops. Electronic equipment broke down near the sites where most sightings were reported, and the witness stories showed amazing consistency across years of reports. Dr. Martinez's final report was published in the Journal of Paranormal Research. It stopped short of confirming supernatural activity, but it said that normal explanations failed to account for all the recorded evidence. The report concluded that the Route 66 ghost hitchhiker was a genuine mystery worthy of more study. The 1960s brought changes to Route 66 that would alter the ghost hitchhiker mystery. The interstate highway system began replacing sections of the old road. Modern routes went around many small towns. This moved traffic away from areas where sightings had been common. As fewer travelers used the original highway, ghost meetings became increasingly rare. But they didn't stop completely. Reports continued from drivers who still used the old route. They chose it or had to use it for some reason. The meetings followed familiar patterns. This suggested the mystery continued even as traffic patterns changed. One of the last well-recorded sightings happened in 1975. Linda Cooper was a nurse from Phoenix. She was driving to visit family in Kansas. She had chosen to take the old Route 66 rather than the interstate. She wanted to see the historic towns and landmarks along the way. Cooper was an experienced driver. She had made similar trips many times before. Near Tucumcari, Cooper met a young woman in a white dress. She wanted a ride to Chicago. Cooper was surprised by the distant destination, but she agreed to take her as far as their paths went together. During the hours that followed, the passenger spoke about changes in the country. She talked about how different everything looked from her memories. Cooper later remembered that the woman's observations seemed old-fashioned. It was like she was comparing the current landscape to much earlier times. When they reached Amarillo, Texas, the passenger asked Cooper to stop at a specific address. Cooper found the location, but she discovered it was occupied by a modern shopping center. No houses existed in the area. When Cooper turned to ask about the confusion, her passenger was gone. Local police confirmed that the address had once been a neighborhood, but it had been torn down in the 1950s to make way for stores. Cooper's meeting marked one of the last recorded sightings of the classic ghost hitchhiker. The mystery of Route 66's ghost hitchhiker has created many theories over the decades. Doubters blame the sightings on driver tiredness and highway hypnosis. They also point to the power of suggestion. They say that long-distance driving can produce false visions and fake memories. The consistent details across reports could result from shared cultural knowledge rather than real meetings. Believers suggest more exotic explanations. Some think the mystery represents a residual haunting. This is where traumatic events leave psychic imprints on physical locations. Others theorize about dimensional rifts or time slips. These allow past events to intrude on present reality. The connection to Mary Henderson's tragic death supports theories about unfinished business keeping spirits earthbound. Paranormal researchers have noted similarities between the Route 66 ghost and hitchhiker ghosts reported worldwide. The basic pattern appears across cultures and geographic regions. This suggests either a universal psychological phenomenon or a genuine supernatural occurrence that manifests in predictable ways. Modern technology has failed to provide clear answers. Despite advances in recording equipment and surveillance systems, no conclusive evidence of the ghost hitchhiker has been captured. This could indicate the phenomenon has ended. Or it might suggest that whatever forces create these encounters exist beyond current technological detection. Route 66 officially lost its federal highway designation in 1985. Though many sections remain drivable as state routes or local roads, tourism organizations promote the historic highway as a nostalgic journey through America's past. Travelers still report occasional strange encounters, but they lack the frequency and consistency of earlier decades. The ghost hitchhiker has become part of Route 66's cultural legacy. Ghost tours and paranormal investigators regularly visit the Tucumcari area. Local businesses market the mystery to tourists seeking supernatural thrills. Whether this commercialization diminishes the phenomenon's authenticity remains a matter of perspective. What cannot be disputed is the profound impact these encounters had on witnesses. Hundreds of people reported experiences that challenged their understanding of reality. Many carried the memories for the rest of their lives. They were unable to find satisfactory explanations for what they witnessed. The mystery took on new dimensions as researchers dug deeper into local history. They discovered that Mary Henderson wasn't the only person who had died along that stretch of highway. In 1923, a family of 4 had perished when their car broke down during a blizzard. They were found frozen to death just miles from where the ghost sightings occurred. In 1931, a young man named Thomas Rivera had been struck by a truck while walking along the roadside near Tucumcari. He was trying to get home to his family in California after losing his job in the Dust Bowl. His body was found the next morning, but his belongings were never recovered. These additional tragedies suggested that the ghost hitchhiker might represent more than just Mary Henderson's spirit. Perhaps the phenomenon was a collective manifestation of all the hopes, dreams, and tragedies that had played out along this stretch of highway over the decades. Dr. Sarah Williams, a folklorist from Arizona State University, spent 5 years in the 1980s collecting stories from Route 66 travelers. She interviewed over 200 people who claimed to have had supernatural encounters along the highway. Her research revealed patterns that extended far beyond the classic hitchhiker sightings. Truck drivers reported seeing phantom vehicles that would appear in their mirrors, follow them for miles, then vanish without explanation. Some described encountering vintage cars from the 1930s and 1940s, complete with period-dressed occupants who would wave as they passed. Others reported temporal anomalies where familiar landmarks would appear different or displaced. Gas stations that had been demolished years earlier would suddenly become visible, complete with attendants in period uniforms. These visions typically lasted only moments before reality reasserted itself. Dr. Williams documented cases where multiple witnesses independently reported seeing the same phenomena at different times. A particular stretch near Adrian, Texas, was associated with sightings of a family in a Dust Bowl-era truck. The family would wave to passing motorists before fading away. At least 15 people reported this exact encounter between 1978 and 1983. The research also revealed that the phenomena weren't limited to human apparitions. Drivers reported encounters with phantom animals that would dart across the highway before vanishing. Some described seeing massive dust storms that would engulf their vehicles, only to clear moments later, revealing unchanged weather conditions. Weather-related anomalies were particularly common in the desert sections of Route 66. Drivers would encounter sudden temperature drops of 20 or 30 degrees that lasted only minutes. Some reported driving through patches of what appeared to be snow or sleet during clear summer days. These extended phenomena suggested that Route 66 had become a kind of psychic highway where the boundary between past and present had become permeable. The road had witnessed so much human drama over the decades that it seemed to retain impressions of significant events. Local Native American tribes had their own explanations for the strange occurrences. The Navajo spoke of places where the spirit world touched the physical world. They believed that certain locations held special significance and could serve as crossing points between dimensions. Elder Joseph Yazzie of the Navajo Nation explained that his people had always known about the power of certain places along what would become Route 66. Long before the highway existed, tribal shamans would perform ceremonies at sites they considered spiritually active. According to Yazzie, the construction of the highway and the subsequent flow of millions of travelers had amplified whatever natural energies existed at these locations. The intense emotions carried by Dust Bowl refugees, war veterans, and other travelers had created a kind of psychic residue that manifested as ghostly encounters. The tribal explanation aligned surprisingly well with modern parapsychological theories about place memory and emotional imprinting. Some researchers suggested that Route 66 had become a kind of time tunnel where past events could replay themselves under certain conditions. This theory gained support from the observation that ghost sightings peaked during times of national crisis or change. The 1940s encounters occurred during World War II. The 1950s sightings coincided with the height of the Cold War and social upheaval. The 1970s reports came during the Vietnam War era and economic uncertainty. Perhaps the ghosts of Route 66 appeared most readily when the living were experiencing the same kinds of upheaval and uncertainty that had characterized the highway's early decades. The phantom hitchhiker might represent the eternal human journey toward hope and new beginnings. Modern paranormal investigators have employed sophisticated equipment to study the Tucumcari area. Digital cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and audio recording devices have all been used in attempts to capture evidence of ghostly activity. Some investigators claim to have recorded electronic voice phenomena near the sites of reported sightings. These mysterious sounds, often interpreted as spirit voices, typically consist of whispered words or phrases. Common recordings include "help me," "going home," and "so far to go." Temperature monitoring has revealed consistent cold spots at specific locations along the highway. These areas maintain temperatures several degrees lower than surrounding locations, even during hot summer days. The cold spots correspond closely to the sites where hitchhiker sightings have been most frequently reported. Electromagnetic anomalies have also been detected near these locations. Car radios will suddenly tune to stations that don't exist, playing music from the 1940s and 1950s before returning to normal programming. Cell phones lose signal strength or display impossible readings. Photography in these areas often produces unusual results. Digital cameras malfunction or capture images that contain unexplained figures or light anomalies. Some photographs show what appear to be people in period clothing, standing near the roadside, though no such individuals were visible when the pictures were taken. Despite this technological evidence, skeptics maintain that the phenomena can be explained by natural causes. Underground mineral deposits could account for electromagnetic anomalies. Temperature variations might result from unique geographical features, and camera malfunctions could be caused by environmental factors like dust or humidity. The debate continues among researchers, believers, and skeptics. But for those who have experienced encounters on Route 66, no amount of scientific explanation can diminish the reality of their experiences. Today, Route 66 exists primarily as a tourist attraction and nostalgic journey. Historic preservation groups work to maintain remaining sections of the original highway. Museums and visitor centers celebrate the road's role in American history and culture. But late at night, when traffic is light and the desert wind carries whispers across the empty landscape, some travelers still report strange encounters. The phantom hitchhiker may be less common than in decades past, but she hasn't disappeared entirely. Park rangers and local law enforcement officers occasionally receive reports from shaken motorists. The stories follow familiar patterns: a young woman in white requesting a ride, then vanishing without explanation. These modern encounters suggest that whatever forces created the original phenomenon may still be active. The most detailed encounter in recent years came from Margaret Foster, a retired teacher from Denver. In 2003, Foster was driving to visit her daughter in Phoenix. She had chosen the old Route 66 route for its historic charm. Near the familiar stretch east of Tucumcari, Foster's headlights caught a young woman walking along the shoulder. The woman wore a white dress that seemed to glow in the darkness. Foster pulled over immediately. She was concerned about someone walking alone on such a desolate stretch of highway. The woman approached the passenger side and thanked Foster for stopping. She asked for a ride to Albuquerque. During the 2-hour drive, the passenger spoke about her family. She mentioned a brother who worked for the railroad and a mother who took in laundry. Foster found these details oddly specific but thought little of it at the time. The woman also commented on how much the landscape had changed. She spoke about farms and buildings that Foster knew hadn't existed for decades. As they neared Albuquerque, The passenger asked Foster to stop at an address in the older part of town. Foster found the location using her GPS. It was an empty lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. When she turned to ask about the mistake, her passenger was gone. The car door hadn't opened. Foster had heard no sound at all. Disturbed by the experience, Foster contacted local historians the next day. She described the woman's comments about the railroad brother and laundry-taking mother. The historians confirmed that these details matched perfectly with Mary Henderson's family situation from 1918. Mary's brother had indeed worked for the Santa Fe Railway. Her mother had supported the family by taking in washing after her husband's death. These specific historical details, unknown to Foster before her encounter, added new weight to the phantom hitchhiker phenomenon. How could she have known such precise information about a woman who died decades before Foster was born? The psychological impact on witnesses extended far beyond the initial encounter. Dr. Robert Martinez, a psychiatrist who studied trauma responses, interviewed dozens of people who claimed phantom hitchhiker experiences. He found that many suffered from what he termed reality displacement anxiety. They questioned their own perceptions and memories long after the encounter ended. Some witnesses reported recurring dreams about their phantom passenger. They would see her in crowds or catch glimpses of white dresses in their peripheral vision. A few claimed to receive phone calls where they could hear only breathing or faint whispers saying, "Thank you for the ride." The town of Tucumcari eventually embraced its ghostly reputation. Local businesses began marketing phantom hitchhiker tours. The Blue Swallow Motel, a historic Route 66 landmark, reported that guests frequently asked about ghost sightings. Some visitors specifically requested rooms facing the highway, hoping to spot the mysterious woman. But longtime residents had mixed feelings about the commercialization. Many preferred when the phenomenon was simply an unspoken part of local life. They worried that too much attention might drive the spirit away or reduce a genuine mystery to mere tourist entertainment. Strange incidents weren't limited to passenger cars and trucks. In 1969, a Greyhound bus driver named Frank Rodriguez reported an unusual experience near the same stretch of highway. His bus was carrying 15 passengers from Albuquerque to Amarillo when he noticed a figure by the roadside near midnight. Rodriguez stopped the bus, assuming someone needed help. A young woman in a white dress climbed aboard. She paid the fare with exact change and took a seat near the back. Rodriguez noticed that her coins felt unusually cold. When he looked in his rearview mirror, he could see her silhouette against the window. About 30 miles down the road, Rodriguez stopped for a scheduled rest break. When passengers returned to the bus, the seat where the woman had been sitting was empty. None of the other passengers remembered seeing her board or leave. The fare money had vanished from the cash box. This incident differed from typical hitchhiker encounters because multiple witnesses should have seen the woman, yet somehow only Rodriguez retained any memory of her presence. This suggested that the phantom might selectively reveal herself to certain individuals while remaining invisible to others. Military personnel seemed particularly susceptible to encounters. Besides Corporal Sullivan's experience, several other veterans reported phantom hitchhiker meetings. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos encountered the woman in 1951 while driving from her discharge ceremony in Texas to her family home in California. The phantom spoke about wanting to see the ocean and asked Santos to describe what waves looked like. Captain David Walsh, no relation to the trucker Bill Walsh, reported a similar encounter in 1953. He was driving through New Mexico when he picked up a hitchhiker near Tucumcari. During their conversation, the woman asked about the war and whether all the soldiers had come home safely. Walsh found her questions poignant, but thought she was simply curious about recent history. When the woman disappeared from his car near Santa Rosa, Walsh initially dismissed it as fatigue-induced hallucination, but her questions haunted him. How had she known he was a veteran? He hadn't been wearing his uniform or displaying any military identification. The encounter left him wondering if some spirits possessed knowledge beyond normal perception. The phantom hitchhiker phenomenon influenced local folklore in unexpected ways. Children in Tucumcari grew up hearing stories about the woman in white. Some claimed to have seen her during family road trips. Others reported dreams where she would appear in their bedroom, asking for directions to places they'd never heard of. High school students developed their own rituals around the legend. They would drive slowly past the supposed sighting locations, hoping to encounter the phantom. Most returned disappointed, but a few claimed success. These teenage accounts were often dismissed by adults, but they shared the same consistent details as reports from seasoned travelers. The ghost hitchhiker of Route 66 represents something uniquely American, the restless spirit always moving toward the next horizon. In a nation built on migration and the promise of new beginnings, perhaps it's fitting that our highways should be haunted by those who never completed their journeys. Whether Mary Henderson still walks the lonely stretches of New Mexico Highway, or whether the phantom hitchhiker represents some collective memory of American travel, the mystery endures. It reminds us that some stories refuse to end, just as some journeys never truly conclude. The next time you find yourself on a dark highway, far from city lights and the comfort of crowds, remember the tales of Route 66's phantom passenger. Listen to the wind whistling past your windows. Watch for movement in your peripheral vision. And if you see a figure in white standing by the roadside, asking for a ride to somewhere far away, you might finally understand why so many travelers couldn't resist the urge to help. After all, we're all just passing through, heading toward destinations we may never reach. And sometimes, in the space between heartbeats, between 1 mile marker and the next, the past reaches out to remind us that some journeys transcend the boundaries of life and death. Have you encountered something unexplained on America's highways? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the shadowy margins of history, where mystery and reality intersect on the endless American road.